My name is Jill Coyle, and welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we talk the nitty-gritty aspects of divorce and help each other come through this not only surviving, but thriving. I'm a divorce attorney, and I'm interviewing other experts and people just like you who are going through or have been through a divorce, so you can have the latest and greatest information on all things before, during, and after divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we are going to talk about everything divorce, whether you're thinking about it, going through it, or in the end have gone through it. Our guest today, I think, is somebody that you are all going to relate to, because he has been through a divorce. Hi, Josh.
Hi, Jill. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So Josh Hall is, can I say that? I don't even know. Do you want me to say you're my client, or just that we kind of move past that?
You could say I was your client, yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
So Josh was a client of mine, and we've now become fast friends. He also does all my videography and amazing work for all of my lovely endeavors. And Josh's story is one that I think will resonate with so many of you. And I'm really grateful that he was courageous and willing to share his story with you all, because again, it's so relatable, because he has been in the trenches of a divorce and the emotional turmoil of it. And, you know, his story, I think, lends a lot of hope to all of you. And I wanted to call this podcast Seeing Color After Divorce. Josh is somebody that, you know, expressed his thoughts in my book, No One Dies from Divorce. And it really brought, I think, a sense of hope to all of you to recognize that you're going to get through this. And I'm excited, Josh. Thank you for being here to kind of show and bear your vulnerable self, so that so many others can hear it straight from the mouth of somebody that's been there, done that, and can lend them hope.
Yeah, I hope it'll resonate with someone anyway.
So Josh, tell everybody just a little bit about yourself, what you do, and, you know, and then we'll get right into your story.
Awesome. Yeah, so I do all things media. So I own a company here in Utah, Dreamstock Media. We film all over the country. We've got clients all over the world. We've got a rental company, which is Utah Film Equipment Rentals. So we rent out to TV shows and commercials. And then we've got a new kind of pocket studio that we're renting out, Image and Sound Studio, here in Eagle Mountain, Utah. So we kind of service the west side of Utah Lake, which is really exciting addition to our company and our kind of portfolio. I've also done some acting, voiceover stuff.
He does have a very, very nice voice, right?
Well, thank you. Yeah. I wish I could say I worked on it, but, you know, it just kind of happened. But I do love all things media, and have just enjoyed the journey, because it really is a journey. And then, of course, filmmaking as well. So
right.
I filmed national TV shows as a director of photography and camera operator, as well as local TV shows. And then I'm a filmmaker, so director and producer of a number of award-winning independent films. And so that's kind of, I'm living my dream. I'll say that much. I've actually now accomplished everything officially that I set out to do in kind of high school and college, what my goals were. And so I feel like I'm living very, my best life, and a very blessed life.
Right. I love that. So just so you know, me and Josh do several projects together. I'm in his studio, his little pocket studio right now. I record all my podcasts. It's lovely and what he's built, but he is creative, and he also directed and produced my docuseries, which we're so excited because we've submitted it to film festivals, and we're so excited for the world to see it, because it really leads, again, another sense of hope to all of you. Like, nobody has said divorce is easy. Even if you wanted a divorce, even if you're like, okay, this is I want this. It's not easy. And that's a lot of what we talk about here on our podcast, right? Josh is just really understanding that it's okay. The emotions you're feeling right now, whether they're frustration or fear or fear of the unknown, anger, those are okay.
Yeah.
Those
absolutely.
are real. Mm-hmm. And what I love about Josh's story is that there was he said in his little opener that he's like, I'm living the dream right now. And I can say this because I've known Josh now for how many years? 2015?
Yeah.
Almost 7 years.
Yeah.
To where I remember a time where I don't think Josh would say he was living the dream.
Absolutely not. No, I mean, the opposite, right? If this is the dream, that was the nightmare,
Right.
And we've all had both at night, right? So we can kind of relate to what that feels like when you wake up in the morning. So,
and that's exactly right. And that's why we're going to talk about this, because I think at the time I met Josh, and this was just my perception, and then I want you to tell the audience kind of your thoughts at the time. But he came to my office distraught, very, very stressed. I think it was very, very hard for you to trust. I think you interviewed me more thoroughly than any other client that I ever had. You and your dad asking me all these questions about what I'm going to do different and what I'm going to. Oh my gosh. And I think we met even maybe twice or 3 times to really get to the point where Josh felt comfortable in hiring me. He was adamant on finding the best attorney for his situation, which we talk about as one of the biggest mistakes in divorce is meet with lots of attorneys. Make sure you find the one that you know has your back. I think that that's really important in this process, because at the end of the day, your divorce attorney has a lot of your life and future in their hands. Mm-hmm. So tell everybody a little bit about your perspective when you walked into my office so long ago. Yeah.
Should I give a little bit of backstory too on that real quick?
I think that would be really good to kind of lay a foundation.
Okay. So I got married pretty young here in Utah. That's kind of just our culture.
We've talked about that.
We get married way too young. Yeah.
Don't get married, young kids.
And just say no. So
just say no.
There's all kinds of challenges that come with that. You don't know a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. You think you know a lot of stuff.
Right.
But you really don't. And I think I was maybe 22 when I got married.
Right.
And it was not a long engagement either. And
which is another thing that happens very readily in Utah, at least back when Josh and I first got married. You got married when? What year?
2012, maybe.
Yeah.
January 2012.
2007 is when I got married, and don't worry, I knew my husband about 4 months, and then we got married. So we can all talk about regrets and how hard that was. You all know a little bit about my story with Ryan and I, but very similar, very quick, very young.
Yeah, just way too young. I always encourage people to give it time. Look, if it's right after a week or a month or 4 months, it's still going to be right after a year or 2 years.
Right.
And that's just the reality. And so just give yourself that time and do your due diligence. I mean, it seems like sometimes maybe we do more due diligence seeking on a house that we're purchasing than sometimes in Utah than we do on a spouse. And that's a much bigger commitment. So,
this is actually something that we should do a full podcast on, is about understanding that when you have a checklist of things that you want in a spouse, it's going to be very easy for you to think that you found that spouse, but that checklist is bull crap.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's really going to come down to love languages. After all of the work that I've done with my husband and all the therapy and reading all these books and becoming what I believe I am kind of an expert in all things marriage, because it helps me be a better divorce attorney, I have recognized that it is more important for you to seek somebody that matches your language. And if you don't know what your language is, go figure it out, because that's going to help a lot. But anyways.
Yeah. Well, and getting married too quickly, too, you don't have time to really see the red flags either, because you can justify all kinds of things in the moment, but the long-term consequences of some of those things, because you're like, oh, that person just had a bad day. If you don't know them long enough to know that there are patterns of that behavior, then you don't know that that is kind of who they are. That's
Right.
not just, well, I had a crap day, today at work. And so you got married too quick. So I'll say that. And then within a year, I think I had stopped justifying things and kind of figured out that there was some stuff going on, and it was not a good situation. I was being blamed for everything. And so whereas I got into the marriage thinking that I was pretty cool, I'm the youngest of 5 kids, I've got the youngest mentality, I thought I was pretty cool. And then,
Historically, youngest kids, too, are the funniest. I saw an article on that the other day, that youngest kids tend to be the funniest. With Josh, I would agree. You kind of have a great sense of humor.
Well, thank you. Yeah,
Which, by the way, I know Josh's parents very well now, just
Yes.
through our relationship, and they're very, very good people. They raised a very good son. So if they're listening and reading this, then shout out to your parents.
Well, thank you. Well, and in some ways, it's we have opportunities in life that humble us, and my marriage was definitely that, because like I was saying, I got into it thinking I was pretty cool, thinking and we had a lot of success too. We were actually very financially successful. We had a rental property, we had a home already, and I hadn't even graduated from college, and we were kind of working our way up. I was growing my company, even while I was in school, and being blamed for everything and being told that you're a bad husband, a bad father, a bad worker, a bad business owner, is very, boy, I mean, that can really do some damage over time. And
Especially when you start hearing those things from the person that's supposed to be your biggest advocate.
Yeah.
The person that you think you're marrying is supposed to be your best friend and supposed to be this person that really supports you in everything. And so for you to continually start hearing this, you're not good enough, you don't do, it plays a toll on your mental.
And they're the person
awareness.
that knows you the most intimately too, and so it hurts almost doubly as much. 'Cause it's
Especially
like,
because they know exactly what to say
yes,
that hurts you the most.
yeah. So I really kind of fell into a funk. I was not in a good place. Emotionally, spiritually, even physically, I was not. I actually had chest pains. I had like heart pain. I've had chronic headaches since high school. They were way worse. Anyway, there were some physical things going on, and finally, we got into therapy and we figured some things out. And long story short, because I don't want to talk too much about that, but long story short, some things happened where there really wasn't a choice anymore except to divorce. So I did file for divorce, which was incredibly heartbreaking. It was difficult, being part of a community, part of a religion where divorce is still kind of stigmatized, frowned upon.
Yep. You're judged harshly of that. Like,
yeah.
You have to go through the mental awareness that people are judging you and thinking, well, you're just a quitter, or you're not good enough, or, you're not living to your standards every day. And that's why it didn't work, which again is, a bunch of crap. Like that's not what we should be basing our failures in the marriage off of, or setting our expectations to. Really, our successes in a marriage should be kindness and support.
Well, and unfortunately in Utah too, I think there was at that time, I think it's getting better now, but there was this kind of propensity towards blaming the husband for divorce. Well, he must have been addicted to porn. He must have cheated. He must have been abusive. He must have this or that, right? He must have caused something to where, and I didn't want to get into that with any friends. I lost a lot of friends within my kind of community that I had built, my neighborhood down in Provo.
Yep.
I moved back with my parents though in Saratoga Springs while I was trying to figure out, kind of buying my next house after giving my ex our home in Provo. And so I wanted her to have a support group. So even though I lost all those friends, they probably believe a lot of things aren't true about me, given, that I was no longer an influence to show, hey, I'm not that person. But I had my support system and I wanted her to have hers. And that's one thing in divorce, you have to be willing to let things go. And so much of our ego is attached to a lot of these things. And so really it is letting go of a lot of things that are superficial, a lot of things that just kind of feed our ego. Like I want to be liked. I want people to think really highly of me.
Right.
Well, you have to let that go in a divorce, because there are going to be people who side with your ex. There's going to be people who they maybe turn against you. And so there's so many things that you don't think about before getting a divorce that really become a big deal after the divorce.
And that's why it's really important when you're going through the divorce to find your tribe. You've got to find your people that have your back, because you're absolutely right. You're going to lose some people that you thought had your back but don't. And you really need to have a support system for you specifically that you can turn to in this time. Because when you're going through this, and again, I know Josh's story, so I can kind of lead us there a little bit, is at the time, I mean, like, did you even feel like you could see in the future that there was a possibility of happiness or a possibility of, just like you said, achieving your dreams? Was it just so hard at the time to kind of see that?
Yeah, I mean, it was just despair. I mean, it was affecting every aspect of my life, including my business, because I no longer had control of my business, which is a whole nother story. Yeah, there was no path forward. And when you know that, and again, some things had happened. So it wasn't just about, well, I don't see myself being happy, so I'm going to get out. Even though that would have been a valid reason, some things had legitimately happened where it's like, there's no turning back now. When somebody does certain things, there's no going back. And so I ended up filing for divorce. I took the recommendation of a neighbor in my parents' neighborhood that they said, "Oh, this attorney's good." And so I don't even know if I looked into other attorneys. I was just like, "Oh, well, they had a good experience. I know that person. I trust that person." And that was the biggest mistake of my entire divorce. That individual was not willing to fight for me. They didn't believe in me. I even remember, the biggest part of your divorce experience is obviously the way that you file, but also your mediation. That's going to really set the tone for a lot of things. And this attorney would always talk big, but she would never follow through on anything. So she would talk the talk and not walk the walk. And during mediation, she just let me get trampled over. The only good thing that came out of mediation was something that I actually negotiated, which was that without a significant change of circumstances, when my child is 3.5 years old, I can do a custody evaluation to see if I can get to 50-50, because I had 40% of the time.
Right. Which I remember at the time, like, that was really hard for you to settle on, because you knew that you wanted as much time with your daughter as possible. And so, for him to have to kind of make that concession in his degree was really, really hard. Yeah. But I absolutely agree. When Josh came to me, after this, he already had his decree, and he had that paragraph that you were just talking about that specifically allowed him to come and modify the decree for more time without showing a substantial change in circumstance. I was like, okay, we can do this. Because so many times people walk into my office and say, I don't like my decree. I want more time with my kids. And they don't have that provision. And I'm left to thinking, well, I don't think you have enough to even tackle the substantial change in circumstance. And it has to be a substantial change that is not foreseeable at the time of the decree. So it is a super high burden. And a lot of people don't meet it. So you could waste a lot of time and energy, and you get all the way to trial, and you don't even get past to best interest because you didn't meet that first hurdle. And it's very similar in a lot of states. Obviously, I am licensed only in Utah and Texas, so I know that standard is the same in both of those states. But it's very, very important for you to hear that when you're going through the divorce, you're on equal footing. But when you are done with that divorce, thinking in your mind, well, in a few years when I have more money, or I have, this, and this, I'll go back for more time with my kids. You might be setting yourself up for an impossibility or a really, really expensive fight in the long run. So good lesson from Josh's experience.
Yeah, it's you really need to guard yourself well, and that's where a good attorney would come in. Thankfully, again, we had that written in without having a good attorney. But yeah, I was shopping around because I knew that when I got to the point where my child was 3.5, I really wanted to be able to do the best that I possibly could. And I knew that attorney wasn't going to do the job. And so where you started out the podcast, I did a lot of interviews, and I interviewed with, I won't call out names, but I interviewed a lot of attorneys.
Yeah.
And one of them in particular, just my 2 cents real quick on choosing an attorney. I met with some who, again, would talk the talk, but you could kind of see in their posture and their attitude that they didn't intend necessarily to follow through. Again, they were just trying to sell me on using their services. And then there was one particular guy that I interviewed. He had his corner office full, all windows, and he was on this treadmill thing with his laptop and
ridiculous.
And I walk in and he's on there oh, look at me, I'm making hundreds of dollars an hour and I'm getting my workout in, you little guy who's going through your divorce, and he actually told me at the end of my time talking with him, because I think that he realized that I wasn't going to choose him anyway,
right,
because he was very narcissistic. He told me, yeah, I had this client. He's a millionaire guy. He's got lots of money. And I said, and he wanted certain things out of his divorce. And I said, oh, yeah, we can get that. We're going to litigate this. We're going to litigate that. We're going to bring in these people. We're going to interview them. We're going to do all these things. And he told me, this was one of the last things he said to me, was just, yeah, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars later, this guy came up to me and he was like, hey, how come we didn't get these things? And he's like, well, I never guaranteed you could get any of those things. We were just going to do all these things. And I knew I didn't want someone like that who's overly litigious, because that's not me. And I don't want to go into court with an attorney who's not representing who I am. And you were the perfect fit. And yeah, I interviewed the hell out of you, probably. And probably to the point where you were like, man, he's annoying. But yeah, we did multiple. And I think, did I even pay for some of that time? I mean, I was paying for time probably to be
I was doing the initial consultations for paid amount, but I don't remember. It was so long ago. But one of the things from this lesson as well is I always laugh when people come in and they're very, very interview when they're interviewing me. Why should I hire you? What have you done in the future, or what have you done with your cases, and what do you believe on this stance? And a lot of what I stand for is that I don't have to sell you me. I know what I do, and I do it well, and you can see it in our reviews. And so when people come to me and they're like, well, why should I hire you? My last thing I usually say is, listen, I don't need your case. I want your case, and I'll take care of you. But if you don't feel that you need me, then you know what? You go find that attorney that you feel like you need. So I don't sell in my consultations at all. I don't convince you. The hardest is when they come to me and they're like, oh, I have another attorney in town. Why should I hire you over this other attorney? And I have a really hard time with that, because I, first of all, don't like to talk bad about other attorneys, especially if they're good attorneys. When they come to me and they're like, oh, I have so-and-so, and I'm like, I really respect this person. We're actually really good friends. I kind of say, hey, this is the way we strategize at our firm. We work as teams and stuff like that. So just kind of a lesson learned from that experience is it is important to meet with a few attorneys. And selly attorneys mean they need your work. And I would be concerned about that, because...
And they'll do free consultations,
yes,
right? Because the idea is we need to get this person in the door so I can sell them so I can make lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
I actually appreciated that I did pay for your time, and it might have been a reduced rate or something like that, but still, your time was worth such, because you were doing so many big cases at the time, that you were paying to come and give me your honest opinion.
Right.
Not, hey, this is why you should choose me, as if this is some kind of I'm choosing a realtor to buy a house,
Right.
So I appreciated that. And there was I was all in. I don't know how many kind of interview almost sessions we did, but I was.
It was
all
a few
in.
months of us before you
was.
retained, and we were like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
So.
But you were a father's rights advocate. You truly believed in me, which I really, really appreciated because, again, my first attorney would say, oh, yeah, you know, like you do deserve to be in your child's life. And so we'll fight hard. But when it came down to it, this attorney told me in mediation, well, you know, it's Utah. You're probably not going to get any time. This is actually a really good deal. You should just take this.
Right.
And that's heartbreaking as a parent who has a flexible schedule so they can be with their child a lot. They like being with their child likes being with them, and yet they settle for less.
Right. A couple of things that I noticed with Josh is that I'm a really good read of people just because I deal with people every day in my career, and I've been doing it for so many years. I recognized very early on that Josh was truthful in his statements and he was sincere in what he wanted and why. The other thing is he backed up what he said with his actions. So a lot of times, you know, we'll get a client who demands that they want 50-50 parent time. And, you know, the first thing I'll ask is, well, who are your children's teachers? When's the last time you went to the orthodontist with your child? When's the last time you went to the pediatrician? And so many of them are like, oh, well, I've never done that. My wife's been able to do that. Or, you know, they use some kind of excuse. And a lot of times we talk about this, like if you want to be an equal parent, you have to show up as an equal parent. Like there's no way that you can go into court and say, I want 50-50 with my kids when you've never done their homework. You've never shown the ability to do that. And so with Josh's situation, it was easy to want to fight for him because he had shown up in every way for his daughter, and he had that flexibility of schedule, and he really showed that he could be that equal parent because he was already doing it. He was already living it, and that's easy. That's the fun part about court, when I get to go in and I don't have to create a case because you are the case. Like you make my job easy. So that was easy for me to see with you, Josh.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
It was also very, very easy. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I was going to say it was very easy also to see that he was married or divorced from a very high conflict personality. And I kind of wanted to shift a little bit into that because another thing when finding an attorney is if you have an high conflict personality spouse or ex-spouse, you have to find an attorney that understands that disorder, what it means, and how to deal with it when you are litigating it. Because if you have somebody that doesn't believe in MPD, who doesn't understand bipolar, who doesn't understand these personality disorders, then just like you said, you're going to get eaten alive and you're never going to be able to have a fair fight. Because guess what? High conflict personalities don't fight fair. So nice guys finish last in those situations. And that's exactly what we knew. We knew that. And from the beginning, when Josh hired me, we strategized his case knowing we had a high conflict personality on the other side.
Yeah. And we really do. We kind of attract and we find people who are similar to us, right? And that first attorney I had, I wanted to be, I'm a Christian man. I wanted to be very Christ-like. That was actually, I remember talking to my parents about this. If I'm going to divorce, I want to be very Christ-like. And I found somebody.
You want to forgive her of her sins?
I wanted to find someone who would be very amicable in every way that I am.
Right.
You know, but in a high conflict situation, that is the worst thing you can do for yourself. And so Jill is a good person, and that's why we vibe so well. You know, she's not like that other guy interviewed, you know, very narcissistic guy. But Jill knows when you're getting the raw end of a deal, and she will not let you get taken advantage of. And again, she'll believe in you and fight for you. Do you want to talk about some tips in divorcing high conflict?
Oh, absolutely. I think this is very, very resonates with so many of our, because, you know, a lot of times you don't hear about the easy divorces. Mm-hmm. Because they were easy, you know, both parties just kind of came together. They were able to work through their problems. They recognized that this was best, and they were able to, you know, sign, seal, deliver, and be done. So we don't hear about those. I'm a high conflict attorney. I people come and hire the bulldog. That's what people call me here in Utah, because they know they have either a high conflict personality on the other side, or they have a high conflict case, and they hire me because they need a firm that is going to help them through that situation. So I think this resonates with a lot of the people that we're talking to or listening and really engaging in what we're doing here. So coming from somebody that has literally lived through it, and I would just want everybody to know Josh's story. It took us how many years to get to trial?
Years. I don't even know
5?
how many years.
I think it took us 5 years.
5 years to resolution.
It took probably 15 court hearings, maybe more.
Yeah.
It took relentless note taking. It took proving false allegation after allegation to be false. It took immense emotional, I guess, wherewithal. Like, you really had to sink in because you were doing this for the greater good, because a high conflict personality will take it so far. They'll use your child against you. They will make you at the end, just like she was doing in your marriage, make it seem like you just should give up, that this is your fault. They play the victim very, very well, and therefore they gaslight you. And then eventually one day you're sitting there 3 years down the road, $100,000 in, thinking, am I the crazy one? Right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and they always, the way that they engage with you, it's always, well, if you do this, it's not going to look good, to a court if like what you're doing is so bad, because, and it really does, it makes you wonder, well, is this bad?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's common sense. It's like being a good person. You're like, well, no, wait, that's
right.
normal. That's
right.
good. Right. And yet, yeah, they get into your head, and man, it's like, oh, I don't even, it's like Inception or something, right? Where they're just like in there, and you're like, man, am I crazy? Am I doing something bad? And then, of course, you go to court and you're validated, and so.
Well, and that's why we're going to give you a little bit, we're going to tease you a little bit, because we're not going to give you the results of what happened when we finally got to trial until after we give you your tips. So stay tuned, because you don't want to miss this. So we're just going to go through with helping you through from the eyes of a actual person who's been through this. So these are not legal suggestions. These, even though a lot of them I highly suggest, but these are literally Josh's suggestions to say, this is what I did that I found to work, and maybe you should think about doing the same. So go ahead. First thought, first tip.
Yeah, is just to record and document everything. So take notes after exchanges with your ex. Do an audio recording where legal. If there's going to be something physical, maybe you could have your phone down and do a video recording. Again, in some states, it's not legal.
So make sure you guys know that.
Consent,
so I want you to hear that. Like in Utah, we're a one-party consent state. So as long as you're part of the recording, it is legal to record another person's with your conversation in the state of Utah. However, like California, it is a two-party consent state. So you cannot legally record somebody unless you physically tell them you are recording. So you need to know that for your state, because you don't want to get in trouble and somehow break the law. So, but if you can, or if you can't, if you can record, great, record. But if you can't, then document. It's fine afterwards to go to your little journal and write down everything, so that you have basically a written visual of what happened on that visit or that exchange or that conversation with your spouse.
Mm-hmm. And the reason is twofold, because like you're saying, a high conflict person won't play fair. And so an exchange, like a parent-time exchange, might happen before your divorce is finalized, or even before mediation, and you're thinking, boy, okay, it was just fine, this and that, and you think, okay, everybody involved is just going to think the same way, but that's not the case. And having that recording is really important, because you might, in a later legal document, find out that your ex is accusing you of yelling at them and calling them a bad person, and you're like, whoa, like,
that didn't happen.
That was like not even close. Like, we didn't even hardly say anything. Yeah. And now all of a sudden I was yelling or ranting for 20 minutes, about how terrible of a person.
When we went to trial with Josh, he had created a binder that probably had 800 pages of documented evidence. And we had maybe 200 voice recordings. It was very noted. It was very easy for us to then, in the testimony in trial, to literally play a recording to the judge and say, hey, in this pleading, she put that this happened, but let me tell you exactly what happened. And I'm not joking. The judge obviously is going to take best evidence. So it was key in getting the results and the end result, what we needed and what we wanted.
Yeah, and the second part for recording is just to be able to prove that that you are who you say you are, and that you are who you say, and that your ex is who you say they are. Because in court, everything is a he said, she said, unless you have something like maybe 10 recordings where your ex is not being a very good person to you, understatement of the year, and you are being very calm and very kind. And so that shows, look, I am who I am, who I'm saying, presenting myself to you, judge, of who I am, and my ex is also who I'm saying that they are.
And a lot of times with these high conflict cases, a lot of times it is he said, she said. Mm-hmm. So the more physical evidence that you can have, the better, because that's exactly right. I think we, compared to our 800 pages of exhibits, opposing party had maybe 100. And what the best part is, her 100 came from the last 4 months before trial. Because she realized she needed to get some evidence to show that maybe she was doing what she was saying. And at first, when we were in trial, it made us nervous a little bit, because the judge made it seem like he was harping a little bit on it, saying that, oh, look she's doing this. She's actively engaging. And we kept just saying, we're like, anybody can do anything for 4 months. It's this case has been going on for 5 years. And, we left that trial almost a little concerned that the judge was going to take her bull crap, her last minute. And again, we'll get to the final result, but the judge maybe leaned a little bit farther to try to show he wasn't as biased as his final result came out. So anyways, it was interesting, but so recording and doing that. The second tip that Josh says is always be the bigger person. So explain what that means.
Yeah, there's going to be so many times when something is said by your ex that's going to be very triggering to you, or just that you're like, come on, that's not who I am. That's not how this is going down, or just something to that extent. And you kind of have to let it go. Do not argue petty things, little things. You are who you are. And if you're recording and you're documenting everything, if you're saving emails, text messages, printing them all out so that you have them ready to go, and just in case, you ever get something filed against you, and even after your divorce, in case something goes through your special master and you're like, geez, I didn't even know this was a thing. You have everything recorded. But just be the bigger person. Don't, again, get into petty arguments. And just let some things go too. They're going to say some things and you're like, yeah, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not this, and it's like, look, the people who I care about their opinion of, they know I'm not that person.
Right.
Look, just let it go that this one person doesn't like you. If you're someone that really likes to have people like you,
we all
you've
like
got
validation.
To let it go.
I'm that kind of
you've got to
person
let
too.
go.
It still stings when somebody doesn't like me, and I've worked really hard in my life to recognize that. Guess what? The naysayers don't matter, because look who I am. I'm Jill Coyle.
Exactly.
It's okay,
Yeah.
I think we all kind of get into that place of where, especially personalities like Josh and I's, where we're like, hey, we're pretty cool. We're pretty kind. We care a lot about other people, and we want, that validation. But the quicker you can realize you don't need that validation from your ex, your high conflict personality ex, the better. Because guess what? You are worthy. You are better. You are enough. And that person is never going to be the person to make you feel that. Yeah. So find it quicker.
And like you're saying, be confident enough in yourself that you know who you are, that you don't need to let this other person define you. Right. Because they're going to try to label you and define you and be like, no, that's not me, and I'm fine. I'm confident enough in myself that I can let that go. So.
Yes. And one of the things that we would think is, again, if you're preparing to present a case of why you should deserve more custody or deserve 50-50 custody, mom or dad, I don't care who you are, you need to make sure you have evidence to show that you've been that parent. And it needs to start prior to the separation. I mean, obviously at the separation, it really needs to step up, but you need to be actively involved in everything child. You need to, make sure you know their likes and their wants and take care of what they need. And you need evidence to show that you're doing that. So, evidence, taking them to the dentist and, scheduling therapy and going with them and, literally just being an active part of their life. One thing I want to say is that when we're married, a lot of times we do fall into gender roles. That's normal. Women are more caretakers naturally. Men are, very, very patriarchal in the fact that they believe that they have to financially support the family. And in Utah, this is even worse because we grew up in like a very, very Christian society where the patriarchal society was just like thrown down your throat, whether, you were in the religion or not. And because of that, you had these primary roles of women, would be the primary caretaker and would take care of, the rearing of the children and kind of raising them. And then men would go out and be the hunters, be the men that would really feed the family. And there's nothing wrong with those roles, but what you have to understand, and whether you've chosen to continue to do that even today as a married couple, if you're a stay-at-home mom and you're doing that and he is the primary breadwinner, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I do want to kind of point out is when you get divorced, that changes. You don't get the opportunity to be the breadwinner and then just be the caretaker because you're going to split roles now where it doesn't matter what kind of parent time that, the breadwinner gets with the children. He is going to have time with those kids. He is going to have to then step in to that caretaker role. And then vice versa. The primary caretaker is going to have to step up and become a supporter or a financial supporter of themselves. So I just want to kind of point that out, that divorce changes those. You don't get to come to court and say, well, I've been this primary role and therefore I should maintain that role. The court's going to look at you and say, that's not how this works now. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, that whatever you're doing in your marriage, great. But once you divorce, it changes. This goes to even discipline of kids. When you're in a marriage and you decide how you want to discipline your kids, go for that. As long as it's not abusive or emotionally abusive, you have but once you separate, that changes. It becomes where really now you have to be thinking about, proper techniques to render kids and make sure that it is fair and safe and that, because it's so easy for the other spouse to kind of change their tune on what they're doing. So sorry, that was a really long rant to our point. And,
But to your point, though, if you're a man who is maybe out of the house a lot working and your wife or soon-to-be ex is the one who's a primary caretaker, you have to step up. And if you start once the divorce is filed, you're way behind the curve. And so you've got to really step up and be that parent. If you're a father who's like, no, I'll just see my kids on the weekends when I'm not working, there's nothing wrong with that. You've got a career, you're trying to earn money to give your kids a good life. But if you're a father who's like, no, I really want to get 40 or 50% time with my child, then you've got to show that you can be that person. And I mean, Jill knows me. I kind of reject hypermasculinity and the patriarchy anyway. And even just yesterday, my daughter, I picked her up from school and she was having a crap day. She'd had several things happen that just weren't very good. And I could just tell that she was down. And so I've always tried to be the kind of father that just listens. So I just sat there in the parking lot with her. I listened to all this, and I was like, you know what we need? We need some treats. So we went to McDonald's was the closest place, and she got a big cinnamon roll, and I got a McFlurry, and we just talked about it. We just talked about just being there, being empathetic, talking it out with your kid, and knowing who they are, what their fears are, what their dreams are. And again, who their teachers are, who their extracurricular activities are with. You have to know all of this. Who their doctor is. Have you taken them to get their vaccinations?
Yeah.
Have you taken them for appointments? You need to show that you are somebody who can be relied on to truly care for every aspect of this child. Not just, well, I make some good money, and so I guess I can send them to ballet. It's not about that. And I can hire a nanny, right, to go do all this stuff. It's like, no, you need to be there,
right,
because that child needs a father if that's what you want. Again,
right.
and
it's
there's
so
no
important.
right way to divorce. There's a lot that goes into it.
It's so important for your kids of divorce to be able to have consistent, frequent contact with both parents in a safe way, specifically people. And so by doing that, you are, you're ensuring your kids' success through divorce. And I talk a lot about that in my book, but just kind of going through some of these other tips we wanted to just quickly get to is be careful of false allegations.
Yep.
Again, goes back to recording everything and making sure you keep a journal because a lot of times these high conflict personality will use anything and everything against you. And that happened in your case, and it was horrible, but we got through it, and we got to trial and presented the evidence, and it was completely thrown out. And even really good orders were put in place that to stop it from ever happening again.
Yeah, and in fact, the false allegations that had me so concerned actually played against the other party, because it was a pattern of showing we do kind of want to axe the father out of the life through making all these allegations that basically, if they were believed, would remove me from the child's life. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't post things on social media. We talk about that all the time. It's somebody will see it. Even if you're private, like somebody's going to send it to your ex. It's going to be used in court. Oh, yeah. Don't do that. And most likely your high conflict personality person can't stop from doing that because they always want to be the victim. They always want to be the one showing people that they're the victim. And therefore it's great because you get to use that against them in court. And we sure do. So it's so fun.
Yeah.
Another thing is just create healthy boundaries. We've talked about this. One of the biggest things you can do is a lot of time with high conflict personality disorders, the other side, they'll barrage you with emails. A lot of times they'll be insanely long. They'll always start with this is what the court order says, and you should have to do this, when that's technically not what the court order. And they will consistently usually have those little pins that, really get you boiling and make you angry. And so the best thing you can do is, first of all, stop. Make sure that the contact between you is in writing. I always say with high conflict, email's the best. The other thing is I say set up rules. So when you are setting up boundaries, don't look at your emails all day. Specifically have them forward into like a box that says ex-spouse or whatnot, and tell your spouse, you know what, on Sunday nights, I'm going to then look at your emails and I will address them appropriately. If there's an emergency, obviously you can always email or text me. But by doing that, you stop the power of them consistently barraging you with every little thing that a lot of times, once you get down to it, it's not what the court order says. It doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be dealt with immediately. And it keeps you from going insane because you don't have to continually worry, have these emails pop up and think you have to address it. And so that's a good way to have boundaries. Put that in your decree. I tell you what, there's no better way to take power away from a high conflict personality than putting boundaries on how much they can communicate with you. Or in your case, Josh, I know special masters are really good. That's a third party intermediary that comes in and is in between you. So no communication goes directly between the parties, and it has to go through the special master or parent time coordinator. And so there's different things you can do, but taking away that power of them to just consistently barrage you with stuff is really, really important.
Absolutely. And don't get to the point, even if you're a year away from your divorce or a year out, right? You have your decree and it seems as though maybe your ex has changed or something. Just don't
fall in that trap.
Don't fall into the trap of being like, well, they want to do a phone call about this thing, about parent time thing, so maybe I should do that. When it specifically says in your decree, everything needs to be in writing.
Right.
And sometimes everything needs to go through the special master if it's a super high conflict situation. Don't fall into that trap because you will be recorded and they'll manipulate things and they'll cut it up to make it look like something.
And then they'll use it against you in court.
Yeah. And so just have healthy boundaries and stick with those healthy boundaries. And it's going to irritate the hell out of your ex-spouse, but you have to just stick with those.
Yes.
Because, again, they don't play fair.
They don't play
fair. If you've got a super high conflict person, unless your spouse has been in like CBT or what is it, DBT therapy for years and years and years.
Which most high conflict personality aren't going to go get help because they don't admit they have a problem.
Not even a week of help. Yeah. Nonetheless, the amount of years it takes to change a high conflict person's behavior.
If you're part of a high conflict marriage right now and you think marriage counseling is going to help, that's another problem.
That is a huge problem.
It's probably not going to help. So you need to go get help for yourself. Mm-hmm. You need to really work on what you can do again to benefit and yourself and make yourself whole, because the other person's not going to do it. Yeah. Abby Metcalf wrote an amazing book called what is it called? Saving Your Marriage Even If Your Spouse Won't do a thing. Mm-hmm. It's something close to that anyways, and it's a fabulous way of understanding what it means to work on yourself. So with that, I just wanted to now end. So we went through this whole process. Mm-hmm. It was really hard, but what happened, Josh?
Yeah, so a lot of emotional. I remember losing tons of weight. Like right after the divorce, I lost 20 pounds in like 2 weeks. I remember somebody giving me a hug and being, "Where are you, Josh?" You know, kind of thing. And I'm already a thin person, so if I lose 20 pounds, like it's bad. I remember sleepless nights. I remember all those things. But you go through that for years.
Yes.
And you get
not years. It doesn't necessarily have to be years, like Josh's experience.
Yeah,
but
it doesn't.
But you go through this phase. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's why you hire a good attorney up front, because they can resolve things in a good way right from the get-go. And then, you're not dealing with it 5 years later. But, eventually we got through court. I was down in the Caribbean, actually, filming some documentary footage. So I'm already like in paradise, doing what I love in paradise. And I remember getting the call. And it was the call saying how everything was going to go. It was from the court, right? Saying this is the
trial had already happened. We did like a 4-day trial, and then the judge took it under advisement and then came back like a week or 2 weeks later to make their ruling, right?
Yeah, and my ex had moved across the country, and so it was kind of for all the dice, because originally I had a custody evaluation saying 50-50 should be what it should be, and then my ex decided to move away very quickly after that decision from the special master, and it made it irrelevant. You can't have 50-50, 2,500 miles away. And so the ruling came down that I would have sole physical custody and that we would share joint legal custody. And it was a total reversal, right? I mean, she had 60% of the time. The court likes precedent, and that precedent had been set for years. But through a lot of hard work, Jill's expertise, the strategy, and then, of course, just being a good person, helps as well. And having all of your evidence in place and documenting everything, we were able to get to that point. And so it was just sort of this unreal. I actually thought if somebody like hit me or pushed me too hard, I'd like wake up and I wouldn't be in the Caribbean and I wouldn't have sole custody and I wouldn't be filming. It'd be like, oh no, I'm in Motel 6 in Phoenix, in July, and I'm filming some whatever, But it was amazing, and I really contribute that to changing. To Jill, I do not think that we would have gotten where we did without you, and so I am just incredibly grateful to you and your whole team and everybody that worked on the case. So.
And that's the best part about Josh's story is like, and I want you to know, like, not every story is going to end as great as Josh's did. But I can promise you something, is that if you hire somebody that understands his personality and understands how to bring the best of you out and the worst of your high conflict personality person out, that things will change and things will get better. The courts are not blind to the fact that there are things we can do, put into place, boundaries we can put into place to really protect you in these kind of situations. And so I just want you to hear that hope. Know that there's a whole rainbow now. And you've heard it. Yeah. You've heard it straight from Josh that he is achieving his dreams now, doing exactly what he always did. He's remarried to a spouse that now sees him and hears him and appreciates what he is. And he's got another little baby. I mean, so I see specifically that, you know, what can happen through such a bad situation. And I just want to lend you, our listeners, hope and remember, no one dies from divorce. You know, with these tips, with these thoughts, if you prepare yourself, you can survive this. And not only that, you can thrive through it. You can become a better person. And just like Josh said, you can live your dreams. Yeah. And what better way to do it when you're down in the dumps, not knowing, you know, what way is right or left and feeling really, really bad about yourself, but then to stand up and say, guess what? This is the best time for me to figure that out and be better than I ever was.
And we're talking about kind of being able to see in color, right? I'm a media guy. I'll give media metaphors all day, every day, right? But live your life in color. You know, if you're going back and you're watching a black and white movie, it's kind of surreal, right? I mean, you almost can't imagine that time in color. You know, when you're watching this movie, I've sat there sometimes and tried to decipher, you know, what color would that be? That kind of grayish color on there, on the person's costume or whatever it is, and you have no idea. And at the time, people didn't know that there was anything different when they were watching a movie. But now we do. And the same thing is true of getting out of a high conflict marriage and getting through a high conflict divorce to have a resolution. You can now see things in color, and it's a world of difference. The first Technicolor movie, like, literally blew people's minds. It was incredible. People never even imagined that would be a thing. And of course, now we take it for granted because everything's in color. But again, when we go back and watch those black and white movies, we really appreciate the whole palette because there's really only gray tones in a black and white. But now we've got the full spectrum of color. And that's what it's like. It's getting out of that despair, getting out of that misery, and living your best life. And if you can't do that, no matter what situation you're in, even if you're battling depression or anxiety or you're in a bad marriage or you're in a high conflict divorce, you know, just know that there is kind of that rainbow, that full spectrum at the end of the tunnel, and you can live your absolute best life, and you can live the dream that you've always hoped for yourself.
Amazing. And we're going to end with that because that's exactly right. Seeing color after a divorce, and it can be beautiful. Hang in there. Till next week. Remember, my book, No One Dies from Divorce, goes into detail about some of these tips to live your best and fullest life. Check it out. You won't regret it. Till next time. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoyle.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.